Hello and welcome to the CTO Perspectives, where we discuss unique perspectives about the most current issues in IT operations with the most current people in IT operations. And here today with us is Jason Walker, former Director of IT Operations at Blizzard Entertainment and currently Big Panda Field CTO. Hey Jason.
Good morning, Yorm. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. It's great having you and talking to you. Let me just dive directly into the opening question. So, based on my former years as an avid science fiction fan, when you say artificial intelligence, what comes to mind to me is this super intelligence or sentient being that knows a lot more than we do and can do a lot more than we do. We have no way of understanding what it does. We cannot participate in what it does, let alone control it. And I have to say that even though I've matured since then and the industry that we deal with is very educated and very technologically oriented, I still get the sense sometimes that when we talk about AI ops, the expectation on the other side is often in the back of their minds, they're expecting to get something similar. Am I mistaken?
No, I think you're absolutely right. And there's two things going on there. One is the typical hype cycle around new technology, and AI definitely falls into that category. People have built it up in sales cycles so much that the expectations are very unrealistic. The other thing, though, is that people tend to, when they look at AI, they're thinking it will come into their environment and be used in a human-like way. And so they anthropomorphize it and then give it superhuman capabilities. And the combination of those two things, the hype and the thinking of it as another person, but a very powerful and knowledgeable one, that really that creates these inflated expectations about what it can do, especially from day one in an organization that maybe doesn't have any AI experience or capability yet.
Right, and then that's where the disappointment comes in, right? There's a lot of stories about like AI and ML not working properly when we started out in IT operations. I guess that's where it comes from.
Yes, and it's very easy to demonstrate in like a POC or POV. Hey, it plugs into your ecosystem of tools very easily, but then the actual utility has to come next. And generally, both the organization, the team, and the AI ops program, they have to work together to realize the potential. And oftentimes, it's a mismatch. That those missed expectations at the beginning lead to an insufficient setup and preparation, and that ends up dooming those initial efforts at that company.
So there's no magical Hollywood AI, right? It's something a little bit different. It's actually based. What is it based on? What would be the what's the right way to do it?
AI, I mean, it's a science. You're going to feed a algorithmic program, a sophisticated one, a normalized set of data. You're going to give it some sort of framework to make decisions in, and then you're going to task it with certain actions. And you have to be, just like anything you do in engineering, software engineering, you have to be very careful about how you do that. And very data preparation is probably the place where most organizations fall over.
So what do you
Uh,
mean? What do you mean by normalize? You started out by saying normalize. What does that mean?
So if you think about a simple term like server in an organization, a human will look at the word server and say, okay, that's the box that has some a CPU and some memory and some disk, and it does things for my IT applications. And you could call it by about 8 different names: a server, a host, a device, maybe by the manufacturer name. There's a lot of different ways to refer to it, and humans will instantly generalize and know all that. The AI doesn't. And if you
Okay.
have 7 different data sources and they call host by different names, you will have to normalize that word
All right.
and put it all in that same format. And
So it
you
doesn't
have to
come
do
in and
that.
totally understand this by its own. First of all, you have to somehow get some sort of common taxonomy throughout everything that you're doing for it to understand it, initially understand what it's looking at.
Yes, and multiple sources make that much more complex because there's a real lack of standards across monitoring tools and just in the IT field in general. We have a lot of manufacturer specific language out there.
And
So
so, okay, and then you said what would be the second step? Once we've normalized everything, what do we do then?
then you convert it to some sort of map that the AI can use in its tasking. And that an enrichment map is what some companies call that. And it, key value pairs. This host is related to this application. This application is related to this business service. And this source system is related to this location from a network perspective. And you just establish those relationships and deliver to the AI maps of your environment one by one by one. And then all of your alerts and events that come in can fall through those, pick up additional attributes, and then the AI will use those in the next step, which is correlation. So if you imagine an alert with 2 attributes, you enrich it with 15 additional ones, and now all of those fields are available for correlation patterns to leverage in grouping alerts on the basis of shared attributes.
All right, so I assume that once you do that, that's where the AI advantage kicks in, right? The AI and ML advantage. So once it knows there's a common language and there's all these connections, now the machine learning can start searching for patterns.
Exactly. And it's going to instantaneously apply. Again, we don't want to anthropomorphize it. It isn't searching. It's instantaneously looking at every event that comes in. It has a time window, and it's going to see what matches the criteria that it has for attributes and group those alerts together. And so it's very systematic, and it is very consistent and reliable, but it is not intelligent. It will never make a cognitive leap to say maybe that network alert is related to that application alert if it doesn't know anything about those two systems.
Okay. All right. So AI and ML are only as good as the people that set it up to begin with.
Yes, and we're not the first ones to say that, but good data in will get you good results, and a good application of your existing tribal knowledge in configuring the AI will definitely benefit you, but you have to learn how to do it well.
And then when it starts learning, I think once again, when it starts learning, you have to be there to tell it if it's doing it right.
Absolutely. And that's putting a human in the loop and giving a verification pass to every bit of output that AI or ML is producing. If you put a human in there who can validate, then the AI is going to pick that up and be able to use it going forward.
Okay, so this is like what's commonly known as the black box phenomenon in AI. So if you do it on its own, it's not going to be able to know if it's doing something right or wrong. And if you put the human in the loop, then you're making it better.
Right, and that's a key component of almost all AI. And I always point to Google spam filters. Google has really good spam filters and has a baseline configuration that's very sophisticated at detecting spam and helping us all out to prevent spam. But it does give you the choice of classifying something as spam. And that's key because all too often things get lost in that folder. And so you have to put a person in the middle to prevent that from happening. And the same is true in IT ops. Your team has to trust what the AI is producing. And that trust comes from explainability. I understand why the AI put these alerts together, and now I can either accept that or I can change the configuration until it makes sense to me or it produces the desired result.
So it's not just making the results better and explaining to the AI or the ML what it's doing right or wrong. It's also gaining trust in the organization. Because if you don't trust it, it's obviously not going to work well, and it's sort of like snowballs.
Right. You can have the best AI in the world, but if nobody understands why it's grouping alerts together, why it took these two seemingly unrelated events and said these two are part of the same incident, then your team is going to reject it out of hand, even if it is correct. And that's kind of the interesting thing, because humans, they don't naturally, an AI might, looking at hundreds of different dimensions simultaneously, find a relationship that humans didn't. And even though that is very useful knowledge, if the humans don't understand why it did that and how it did that, then they won't be able to act on that. And they'll reject it.
So us humans are important throughout the whole process of AI ML. We're not redundant, happily enough.
No, and I always told my team if they can just manage the ML and the AI and just run their bot army, then they would always have a job. because that's the new job in IT ops.
Right. So I'm assuming that's the philosophy of Big Panda's open box machine learning.
Yes, and Big Panda's taken a very pragmatic approach to it and said, "Hey, I'm an organization. I'm looking at all the IT ops knowledge that's out there, all that tribal knowledge. I'm going to take that in first, convert it to enrichment maps, and then I'm going to take the existing correlation patterns that probably most IT ops teams know what is related. This change is related to this alert or will cause these alerts. This network alert almost always impacts that database or that application." They'll take all of those and start with those as the initial correlation patterns. Then they will surface up suggestions as the ML on the back end crunches through all of that data and starts to see patterns that maybe people didn't.
Got it. And what was your experience in Blizzard with open box machine learning?
For me, there was a light bulb moment. When we had fed in several different enrichment maps, but one of the things we did was take our troubleshooting guides or our run books, which had a whole bunch of condition IDs and then the associated service that you were trying to diagnose failures for. And those have been put together over a period of years by engineers from multiple different teams. They were phrased like, you may see these alerts when this type of failure occurs. And we had almost 1,000 of them. And we converted those to enrichment maps, not thinking that they would ever be used for anything in particular. And within the first week in the POV, actually, Big Panda started surfacing incidents that said, hey, all of these alerts were in the same troubleshooting guide. And we think they're related. And it was correct. And it was something that we had never looked at as a potential correlation pattern, but it didn't skip that step. It didn't make the assumption. It didn't overlook that. And that's, again, one of the advantages is a good ML set up well will not miss anything that you may have missed as a human. And so it was an instant win for the team because the trust was established right then and there.
So cool. So there is a bit of magic, but it's always based on the way that you set it up.
Absolutely. And it's incremental magic, not switch it on and it takes over your IT operations function entirely. It's very much, oh wow, I didn't know it could do that. This is much better than many of the other tools I've seen. But you build on it and you get better at using it over time.
Great. I think that's a high note that we can end in. Thank you so much for talking to me today.
That was a good talk. I really appreciate the time.
I appreciate it as well. And if you want to learn more about Big Panda AI or about the Big Panda platform, just view our other CTO Perspectives videos or visit us at bigpanda.io. See you next time.